وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها أنها قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يخفف الركعتين اللتين قبل صلاة الصبح حتى إني أقول أقرأ بأم القرآن متفق عليه. From Aisha radiyallahu anha that she said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to lighten, and I'm not sure whether that's the best word to use or whether there's a better word to use than that, but he used to lighten the 2 rak'ah before Fajr to the point that it would be said perhaps he only read al-Quran. Yani perhaps he only read Surah Al-Fatiha. Perhaps he only read Surah Al-Fatiha. Muttafaqun alayh. Now, this hadith deals with a sunnah relating to the Fajr prayer. Just getting some echo back on the microphone. If I move it back a little bit, it might be better. So this relates to a sunnah of the Fajr prayer. And that is that the sunnah before Fajr, we know that it is 2 rak'at that you pray before Fajr, should be light in the sense that they are not long sunnah prayers where you stand for, maybe 10 minutes in each rak'ah. They are extremely light. Now, the word light is interesting rather than the word quick, because the word quick would indicate rushing the prayer, maybe not giving it its proper right. No, the prayer still has its proper right. There's still a proper ruku', there's still a proper sujood, but they are khafifatan. They're light. They are not burdensome, not long. And they were so light to the point that Aisha radiallahu anha said, maybe the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam only read Surah Al-Fatiha. Now here we have to go back to something we learned earlier, which is that if he had only read Surah Al-Fatiha, would the prayer have been valid? And the answer is yes, because the minimum that you must read in order for your prayer to be valid is Surah Al-Fatiha. However, the second question we should ask ourselves is, does this hadith indicate that he really did only read Surah Al-Fatiha? And the answer to that is no. Because Aisha here, she does not say so definitively. She doesn't say the Prophet ﷺ only read Surah Al-Fatiha. She said, Hatta inni aqul, to the point where I said, did he only read Surah Al-Fatiha? This is istifham, and a question from Aisha to herself. She's asking herself, did he just read Al-Fatiha? So it indicates that the Prophet ﷺ would make the prayer short, to the point where Aisha even questioned whether he read anything after Surah Al-Fatiha. However, if we take the next hadith, and this hadith of Aisha is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, if we take the next hadith, and that is the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قرأ في ركعتي الفجر قل يا أيها الكافرون وقل هو الله أحد رواه مسلم. Abu Hurairah narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam read in the 2 rak'at of Fajr, meaning the 2 sunnah, قل يا أيها الكافرون, meaning he read Surah Al-Fatiha, and then after Surah Al-Fatiha he read قل يا أيها الكافرون, and he read قل هو الله أحد. And this is a sunnah, so this is one of the things that you can do when you read the 2 rak'ah before Fajr and the 2 after Maghrib. One of the sunnahs is that in those you read Surah Al-Fatiha and you read قل يا أيها الكافرون in the first and قل هو الله أحد in the second. In fact, we can add to that also that it's a sunnah in raka'atay al-tawaf, that the 2 raka'at that you pray after tawaf, again to read قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ and قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. And the Prophet ﷺ said in some hadith, what an excellent 2 surahs they are. And it's worth reflecting on why they are so excellent, or why they are so valued, and why the Prophet ﷺ in many of his prayers used to read these particular 2 together. And there's a lot you can say about that. But if you think about قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, what is this? This is al-bara'a min ash-shirki wa ahlihi. This is declaring yourself to be free from shirk and its people. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ. Say, O you disbelievers, I don't worship what you worship. And at the end of the surah, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينُ. You have your religion and I have my religion. And you stick to your way and I have mine, because I have nothing to do with you and I have nothing to do with what you worship except the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what little of it those people do. So قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ is really, it's a surah we read a lot and we often don't think about the meanings of it a lot. Because we don't fully, sometimes we don't appreciate the importance that our religion gives to disassociating ourselves from the disbelievers and from their worship. And we know that this is a theme that comes again and again in the Quran, but Surah Al-Kafirun is one that emphasizes that. And likewise, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, that the Prophet ﷺ said, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ تَعْدِلُ ثُلُثَ الْقُرْآنِ. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ is equal to 1/3 of the Quran. And you see the understanding of La ilaha illallah. It's as if you're getting a tafsir of La ilaha illallah from these 2. And there is no doubt that قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ emphasizes the aspect of Tawheed al-uluhiyyah, that we only worship Allah Azza wa Jal and we don't worship anything except Him, and that all of our aspects of worship are directed towards Him alone. And قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ includes that also, but it also has that emphasis upon the Tawheed of al-rububiyyah and al-asma' al-sifat, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alone in the things that He does, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is a samad, الذي لم يلد ولم يولد. So this emphasizes for us the different kinds of tawheed and worship of Allah alone, and the comprehensive meaning of La ilaha illallah can be found within these 2 surahs. And that's why these 2 go together, because we said that the Prophet ﷺ generally in his salah did not read parts of the Quran, any parts of the surah. He would read a complete surah in one rak'ah and a complete surah in the next rak'ah. And also he would read generally the surahs that are together. So for example, سَبِّحِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ الْأَعْلَى is followed by هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ الْغَاشِيَةِ. He would read the surahs that are generally, not all the time, but often he would read them that are together. However, here is an instance where the 2 are not together, even though they're very close in the Quran, but they're not together. But because of the suitability of these 2 surahs and the importance of them, the Prophet ﷺ would habitually read them in the 2 rak'ah before Fajr and the 2 rak'ah after Maghrib, as well as rak'atay at-tawaf, the 2 rak'ah after making tawaf, whether that tawaf is part of Umrah or whether it is part of Hajj, or whether it is part of the voluntary tawaf the people do upon entering the Masjid al-Haram. And this hadith is narrated by Muslim. And this hadith indicates to us that the hadith of Aisha is not making jazm. She is not saying for certain that the Prophet ﷺ read only Al-Fatiha. Rather, what she is doing is she's approximating for you how short the prayer was. And obviously, if you read Al-Fatiha and Qul Huwallahu Ahad, your prayer is no doubt, it's a short rak'ah. It's not a long rak'ah like he used to do. We can also take from that other than otherwise, he generally would lengthen his voluntary prayers. And his voluntary prayers were not very, very short. Because you can see that Aisha is surprised by the shortness of these 2 rak'at, which kind of gives us the indication that that wasn't the norm among the Prophet ﷺ in his prayers generally. He would, and he prayed them of a reasonable length. We'll go on to our next hadith. وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها أنها قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا صلى ركعتي الفجر اضطجع على شقه الأيمن رواه البخاري. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا صلى أحدكم الركعتين قبل صلاة الصبح فليضطجع على جنبه الأيمن رواه أحمد وأبو داود والترمذي وصححه. 2 hadiths, one from Aisha and the other from Abu Hurairah. The hadith of Aisha is narrated by Al-Bukhari, and the hadith of Abu Hurairah is narrated by Ahmad and Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, who declared it to be authentic. As for the hadith of Aisha that is narrated in Sahih Bukhari, it is narrated from as-sunnatul fi'liyah. Because what is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? ما أضيف إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من قول أو فعل أو تقرير أو صفة خلقية أو خلقية. What is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ from his speech and his action and his approval and his description, whether the physical description of him or the description of his personality. So this is from a sunnatul fi'liyah, from the things which the Prophet ﷺ himself did. And that's how Al-Bukhari narrates this. That the Prophet ﷺ, when he prayed the 2 rak'ah of Fajr, yani the 2 voluntary prayers before Fajr, the 2 voluntary rak'ah before Fajr, he would lie down on his right hand side. As we said, and I think I alluded to this last time, this is from the sunan that maybe you can say are mahjura, yani the people have left in this time. And that is that the person, after they pray the 2 rak'ah of Fajr, from the sunnah is for you to lie down on your right hand side until the time of the iqamah. And this is something that, alhamdulillah, people still do it today, but it's not like really common as it was perhaps in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of the scholars said this is for the one who prayed the tahajjud prayer. And this isn't mentioned in the hadith, but they took that from the understanding that this is kind of something where a person can maybe they've been praying for the night and they can take a short rest before the Fajr starts. It's also mentioned that the reason for this is the length between the adhan and the iqamah in Fajr is generally longer than the other prayers. And that's because many people are asleep, they wake up, some people need to make ghusl and so on and so forth. So there is a longer gap between the adhan and the iqamah for Salatul Fajr. So this narration of Al-Bukhari narrates this from a sunnatul fi'liyah, from the things that the Prophet ﷺ did without commanding other people to do it. As for the hadith of Abu Hurairah narrated by Ahmad and Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, then in this hadith the Prophet ﷺ said, or it said, if the Prophet ﷺ said, if one of you prays the 2 rak'ah before Fajr, let him lie down on his right hand side. So this is from Sunnatul Qawliyyah. The Prophet ﷺ now is telling us to do this. And this hadith has some weakness in it. Which I won't go into a great deal of detail in it. But it is a hadith which some of the scholars said has a weakness in it. And there's no doubt that the stronger wording of the hadith is what the Prophet ﷺ did rather than him commanding you to do it. However, the companions, as is narrated in some of the other ahadith, used to do this and they took this from the Prophet ﷺ and he didn't forbid them from doing it. So it remains from the things which is within the sunnah to do if you wish. Especially if you if you feel a little tired, or you feel and you want to just lie down. And the aim is not to go to sleep, but just to relax yourself. And once again we said that you need to bear in mind the issue of, or the issues of muru'ah and what the people understand, and not to do this in a place where it's going to cause commotion, or someone's going to come and say, why are you lying down in the masjid, and then there might be some commotion or some argumentation in the jama'ah. The problem is we're living in a time where sometimes if you implement the sunnah in certain regards, people become upset with you. So if you are in a masjid where people don't mind this and it's not going to cause any difficulty, then there's no harm in it, inshallah. In fact, it's a good thing to revive this sunnah. And if you find that you're in a situation where this causes some commotion, or it causes some people to become upset, then perhaps it's something that you can implement in a different place at a different time, inshallah ta'ala. I want to see if the Shaykh added, or if there's something from here that I haven't added. There's a lot of things I haven't added, but I wanted to see if there was something particular in here that I wanted to add. So the Shaykh, he went through the different opinions. The scholars had 4 opinions on this. The first opinion is that it is wajib, and that was the opinion of, no prizes for guessing, Ibn Hazm from the Zahiriyya, because he took the amr here, lil wujub, yani that it is wajib. And this is a weak opinion. This was not the opinion of the majority. The second is that this is not allowed. And it was rejected, or it was disliked by Ibn Umar and Ibn Mas'ud. And the third is that it is recommended, and this is the opinion of the Hanabila and the Shafi'iyya. And it was the one that the author of Subul al-Salam chose. And the fourth one is that it is allowed for the one who prays the night prayer. And this is the opinion that was chosen by Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. So that is also a reasonable, and that breaks it down to some different, the different opinions in that regard. And as we said, I think one of the latter 2 opinions, either you say it's mustahab for everyone, or you say that it's allowed for the one who prayed tahajjud, who prayed the night prayer. We'll move on to the next hadith, insha'Allah ta'ala. وعن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلاة الليل مثنى مثنى فإذا خشي أحدكم الصبح صلى ركعة واحدة توتر له ما قد صلى. From Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, that he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the night prayer is 2 by 2. Does it mean 2 by 2? I need two raka'at by 2. Pray 2 and then you make salam, and then you pray 2 and then you make salam, and then you pray 2 and then you make salam, and so on. The night prayer is 2 by 2. So if one of you fears the morning coming, he prays a single raka'ah, which will make odd what he has prayed. And he will make the total number of raka'at that he has prayed an odd number. So this deals with the night prayer, and it deals with the night prayer, and it deals with the witr prayer. The night prayer is one of the most important of the voluntary prayers in Islam. Even though we could say that there are prayers that you should start with before that, and there are things that if you are just going to start your voluntary prayers, probably the first one we said you start with the witr, the 2 rak'ah before fajr, the ratiba prayers that the Prophet ﷺ prayed all the time. But once you have started to pray those prayers regularly, for sure one of the prayers that should be given the most importance is the night prayer. And the night prayer has a huge virtue, no doubt, and one of those virtues is that it matches the time in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the lowest heaven. And Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in many ayat the virtue of the night prayer. For example, in Surah Al-Sajdah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, تَتَجَافَى جُنُوبُهُمْ عَنِ الْمَضَاجِعِ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. That they rise up from their sides, from their beds, standing in prayer, calling upon their Lord in fear and hope, and out of what they have been, or out of what Allah has provided for them, they spend. And Allah Azza wa Jal said in Surah Al-Dhariyat, كَانُوا قَلِيلًا مِنَ اللَّيْلِ مَا يَهْجَعُونَ وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ هُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. That they used to, the people of Jannah, one of the signs of the people of Jannah is that they didn't used to sleep the whole night. And in the early morning, they used to be making istighfar. They used to be asking Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive them. And there are many ayat and ahadith which encourage the praying of the night prayer. And broadly, we can divide our discussion about the night prayer into 3 areas. And that is the discussion about the night prayer itself, which is what we call Qiyamul Layl, or we call it Tahajjud. And the second is the discussion about the night prayer in Ramadan, which we call Taraweeh. And the third is the discussion regarding the witr. And as regards the witr, of course, linguistically, witr means an odd number. And so, for example, 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. As for in the Sharia, the witr is it is generally the last prayer that you pray, although it doesn't have to be the last prayer that you pray. And the witr is prayed usually, or the best time to pray witr. If we look at the sunnah, we have 2 times that witr is mentioned. Generally, the best time to pray witr, if you get up for tahajjud, is to pray witr at the end of your tahajjud. As is in this hadith that we heard that the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِذَا خَشِيَ أَحَدُكُمُ الصُّبْحِ صَلَّى رَكَعَةً وَاحِدًا. If one of you fears that the morning is going to come, he prays 1 rak'ah. However, if you know yourself that you don't usually get up for tahajjud, or you're on and off, like sometimes you get up and sometimes you don't, then the best time to pray witr is to pray before you go to sleep. And this is also reported from the sunnah in the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, in which he said, my beloved recommended for me 3 things. Yani awsani khalili, my beloved advised me to do 3 things. And one of them is for me to pray the witr before I go to sleep. So what we say here is, if you are just starting out praying the witr or tahajjud, and you sometimes get up, you sometimes don't, or you fear you might not get up that day because you're very tired, or you've gone to bed late, then one of the things that you should get in the habit of doing is praying the witr before you go to bed. The last thing before you go to bed, pray your witr prayer. we don't pray 2 witr in one night. Okay? So if you get up then for tahajjud and you've already prayed your witr, pray your tahajjud, but don't pray witr again. Don't pray witr again. And as for this thing people do of cancelling the witr, where they pray witr and then they stand up and pray one more rak'ah, wallahi, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't find there to be a lot of evidence for doing this in the sunnah, this issue of cancelling the witr. The better thing to do is just pray the witr at whatever time you pray it and just don't repeat it. Because the Prophet ﷺ did not force witr to be the last or compel you for witr to be the last prayer. Rather, he indicated that this is the best thing to do, for witr to be the last prayer. However, if you've prayed witr already in the night, maybe you prayed it with the Imam in Ramadan or whatever it is, and you want to pray after, but don't repeat the witr. As for this thing that people have of praying, cancelling witr by praying one more rak'ah to make it odd, to make it even after it was odd and so on, and I personally find it to be a little bit, it doesn't really have a lot of evidence for it apart from linguistically, the issue of making an odd number even, it doesn't really have a lot of evidence for it. There are lots and lots of different ways of praying witr. And before that, we should probably talk about the ruling of witr. And I think we said that the scholars probably, the biggest difference in witr is on this issue of the ruling of witr. And you can broadly divide it into 3 groups. It's probably the easiest way of thinking about it. Even though within that 3 groups there are lots of very nuanced differences. But broadly you can divide it into 3 groups. Either witr is fard, or either witr is sunnah, or either witr is neither fard nor sunnah but somewhere in between. And the way that it would be in between, as some of the scholars said, is that if you leave it once or twice, it's not haram. But if you leave it kulliyan, that you never pray witr at all, it becomes haram. Or we say that if you leave it all the time, you are blameworthy for your lack of attention to it or something like that. So either we say that it's fard, or either we say that it's sunnah, or either we say that it's kind of somewhere in between. We can call it sunnah mu'akkada, or we can call it wajib, according to the different terminology, but it lies somewhere in between, in which case you're blameworthy for leaving it all the time. But if you leave it one night or 2 nights, or like occasionally, then you're not blameworthy for it. Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. And it seems to me, Wallahu tabaraka ta'ala a'lam, that the evidence that the 5 daily prayers are the only obligatory 5 is a strong evidence. At the same time, there's no doubt that if you habitually leave witr, there is certainly a blame on you for that. It's certainly a blameworthy characteristic to find a person who misses witr. And many of the scholars considered witr to be the most important of all of the voluntary prayers. And all of the prayers outside of the 5 daily prayers, that witr to be the most important. So it's something that we really should be in the habit. Of praying. And as I said, witr is something where there are a number of different ways of praying. Now, instead of taking a long time to go through all of them, I'll cover the three most common ways of praying witr. The first is to pray 2 raka'at, to give the salam, to stand up and to pray 1, and then give the salam. So you have 2 separate prayers. You have what they sometimes call al-shafi' wal-witr, the 2 followed by a 1. And in general, this seems to me to be the best of the ways of praying, because it contains 2 complete units as a separate prayer and 1 as a separate prayer. The second way of praying is to pray 3 raka'at without tashahhud in the middle. So in this case, you would pray 1, you would stand up and pray the second, and then without sitting, you would stand up and pray the third, with only 1 tashahhud at the end of the third. So it's not like Maghrib. Because the difference is in Maghrib, you sit after 2, right? And then you stand up for the 3rd. Here you will be standing up, you will only be sitting at the very end. And the last way is to pray 1 rak'ah on its own, without praying the shafa', without praying the 2 that comes before it. And there are ways to pray more than that. You could pray 5, you can pray 7, you can pray, there are different options and each one of those has a different way of praying them. But we'll deal with the 3 most common when it comes to the witr, and they are, as we said, to pray 2, to give the salam, to stand up and pray 1 and give the salam. And the second way, to pray 3 continuously without sitting, and then to sit at the end of the 3rd. And the last way, to pray 1 on its own without praying the 2 before it. There is a 4th way which I don't recommend, and that is to pray the witr like Maghrib, because the Prophet ﷺ forbade the witr from being prayed like Maghrib. Now those people who pray witr like Maghrib, they have a response to that. From the Hanafis and some of the people who pray witr like this, they say we're not praying witr like Maghrib because we make dua in our witr prayer and we don't make dua in our Maghrib prayer. The problem with that is, first of all, they ask circumstances in which you can pray, you can make dua in the Maghrib prayer. That's the first thing. And secondly, the dua is not an obligatory part of the witr prayer, and therefore, in essence, you haven't changed the prayer from Maghrib. You've changed a minor detail. It's like saying, I don't pray witr like Maghrib because in my sujood, I make a different dua. That in reality, that doesn't change the essence of the way that you prayed. The essence of the way that you prayed is still like Maghrib. So I personally don't recommend for people to pray the witr like that, because to me it seems like it falls under the prohibition in which the Prophet ﷺ prohibited making the witr like Maghrib. And the difference between the witr and Maghrib is not enough to say that the difference is that I make dua, because in reality this dua doesn't change the essence of the way that you have actually prayed. And the evidence for that is you could have put that dua in Maghrib in certain circumstances, like Qunutun Nazila, when there is a catastrophe or something like that. So it seems to me, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best, that it's not allowed to pray Maghrib in that way. And instead a person should change to pray witr in that way. Instead a person should change to make their witr like one of the three that we mentioned. As for the surahs that the Prophet ﷺ used to write, habitually he used to read Sabbih Isma Rabbika al-A'la in the first rak'ah of witr, and Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun in the second, and Qul Huwallahu Ahad in the third. And that's regardless of whether you pray them as 3 or whether you pray them as 2 and 1. If 2 and 1, Sabbih Isma Rabbika al-A'la and Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun, and then when you start your next prayer, Qul Huwallahu Ahad. Of course, all of those are preceded by Surah Al-Fatiha. As for Taraweeh, I won't cover it in too much detail. I think one of the most important things to cover is whether Taraweeh is even a separate prayer or not, or whether Taraweeh is just the name for Tahajjud in Ramadan. But in some ways that's less important than the fact that Taraweeh has some differences to it. First of all, it's prayed in Jama'ah. And generally the Tahajjud prayer isn't prayed in Jama'ah unless it's done in an ad hoc way, meaning that maybe I start praying Tahajjud in a masjid and somebody comes in and he sees I'm praying Tahajjud and he joins me. There's no harm in that. But as for organizing Tahajjud, or let's all get up at 3 a.m. and pray Tahajjud together, then this is closer to being an innovation, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best, because it's not narrated that the Prophet ﷺ ever gathered the people or organized a jama'ah for Tahajjud in any time other than Ramadan. However, if it happens by, just not by accident, but by just without planning, for example, someone is praying and someone else comes to join, then this is mentioned in the Sunnah. Ibn Abbas, when he stayed with his aunt Maymuna radiallahu anhum, he joined the Prophet ﷺ, and as we mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ took him from one side to the other. So in this, there is no harm in joining someone's night prayer But as for organizing a jama'ah for the night prayer, where we say, okay, let's all get up at 3 a.m. and we all come together and do it, this is not appropriate except in the month of Ramadan. And the other difference between Taraweeh and Tahajjud in terms of is the time. Because generally, Taraweeh is prayed along with the Isha prayer, or at the time when the Imam agrees to gather the people together. As for the tahajjud, then the tahajjud is often delayed until the last third of the night. And the scholars differed among themselves about whether these are two fundamentally different prayers or whether they are basically the exact same prayer, but they are just prayed at, and one of them is prayed in Ramadan and one of them is prayed outside of Ramadan. And that gets into the topic of the hadith of Aisha about the Prophet ﷺ not praying more than 8 rak'ah inside of Ramadan or outside of Ramadan and so on. To give you any, it's not really the time for it now, but just to kind of preempt the question, in my opinion, I don't believe that this 8 is a limit. I don't believe that this 8 is a fixed limit, that if you go more than that, it's not allowed to go more than that. And if you want to pray more than that, you can pray more than that. But the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is to pray 8 raka'at inside and outside of Ramadan. But if a person wants to pray more than that or less than that, then inshallah ta'ala we don't see that there is any harm in this from the action of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and the Imams who followed them, is that they didn't understand this 8 to be an absolute limit, that if you go 1 rak'ah over, you've done something wrong, or if you go 1 rak'ah under, you've done something wrong. Rather, this is something that it is a sunnah, and if you do it, then that is, inshallah, better, according to what is easy. Let's see, have we covered all of the points that I wanted to cover? Yeah, inshallah. I think inshallah ta'ala we'll stop there because the next hadith I want to cover in a little bit of detail. Which is this issue of, the next hadith is this issue of whether all of the sunnah prayers are 2 by 2 or whether some of the sunnah prayers are 4 and some of them are 2. So because I want to cover this in a bit more detail, I think inshallah ta'ala we'll stop here, especially since it's the first lesson after a while, so we'll get back into it inshallah. But I don't think there'll be any interruptions now until Ramadan. Inshallah, I'm hoping there will not be any interruptions in the class now until Ramadan, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. So we'll stop there inshallah, and we'll continue next Wednesday, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Also, I will apologize also for the sister's side. We know that we still haven't managed to fix the TV video link. We're working on it, inshallah. Like I keep forgetting to order the particular cable that is missing. But inshallah ta'ala, I'll do that today. So hopefully by next week, we'll have the TV link working again. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Wassalatu wassalam ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.